Welcome everybody to the Coalition for Marriage YouTube channel. It's a privilege to have with us today Dr. Trevor Stammers. Now, Trevor spent time working with Norman Wells, and many of you will know that Norman Wells was one of our former trustees who sadly died during the early part of 2020. Greatly missed, of course, by his family and friends and everybody who knows him. He was a trustee with us at Coalition for Marriage. He also worked as the director of the Family Education Trust, and one of the trustees of the FET was Dr. Trevor Stammers. It's a privilege to have Trevor with us today, and we're going to talk for a few moments about Norman's work with the FET and some related issues. Trevor, it's wonderful to have you with us. Would you like to say hi to our supporters?
Thanks very much indeed, Tony. It's good to be with you, and I look forward to sharing the conversation with you.
Thank you very much. Can I ask you, just as we start off, perhaps you could tell us a little bit about your own professional background, and then maybe you could move in a little bit to how you came upon working with Norman.
Well, I wanted to be a medical doctor from probably about my early teens, and I went to University College London. I then went into postgraduate training in general practice and was a general practitioner in Merton for 27 years. And I think during that time, as well as learning to care for patients, my passion for teaching developed. And as time went by, the passion for teaching kind of overtook. So in 2010, in the March of that year, I had an opportunity to go full-time into academia. I'd been working as a university academic in research and teaching in medical ethics and law. I suppose my first encounters with Norman would have been around about 2013, 14, something like that. I'd actually got involved with Family Education Trust when I was working in London as a junior doctor. And certainly my first memories of Norman, the word that immediately comes to mind is how methodical he was, which is a great person to have as a CEO of your charity. He had a fantastic memory for detail and order, and a lovely manner too, if any disagreements, which happens in any work, should arise. He was a superb negotiator and someone who helped people to come together and work together for a common cause. Great guy.
And how many years did you spend working with Norman?
So we would have been working together for at least 16 years. I heard of his death shortly after the 1st of April, as well as an enormous sense of grief and loss at a guy in his prime doing a good job, sadly dying of this awful disease, and grief for his wife and large family.
Well, let's spend a few moments talking about some of the projects that were close to Norman's heart. Could you give us maybe 2 or 3 examples of things, and maybe we'll then look at 1 or 2 of them in a bit more detail?
I think there were 3 broad areas. One was his interest and indeed engagement, involvement in home education of children. And he and his wife, Nicola, home educated all of their children. In the early days, we used to have committee meetings at his home, and the children would all be there. And I hope that I never said this to Norman, but there were some similarities with the Von Trapp family in the sound of music. They were all very talented children, and so there was a living example there of how home education can raise some amazing children. But that wasn't the primary thrust for Family Education Trust, which was more focused on the other 2 areas, which were the promotion, I suppose, advocacy of marriage and its advantages, and the protection of children. I think that those were the 2 key elements of Family Education Trust through research and writing. And Norman was a careful and clever, accurate, absolutely detailed writer. And I think there's no doubt that his books will serve current and future generations for quite some time to come on some of the issues, particularly the more recent ones, which I think pose a real threat to young people's welfare.
In terms of Norman's own faith, if you like, and I know that Family Education Trust, like the Coalition for Marriage, have supporters from all faiths and none. But Norman was a Christian himself?
Very much so, yes. But as you very rightly mentioned, Family Education Trust itself was a secular charity. I suppose perhaps not a coincidence that a substantial proportion of those supporters and folks on committee shared Norman's Christian faith, including myself, but by no means all. And the work very much focused on, if you like, those things that would be compatible with faith, but defending them from a secular point of view, which was one of the strengths of the charity, I think, and will continue to be so.
Very much so. It definitely seemed to punch above its weight. I wonder, Trevor, if we could spend a few moments picking up on some of that evidence base. Firstly, of course, maybe from the marriage perspective, it's something which obviously Norman joined us because of his own passion in that area. Can you tell us a little bit about his work promoting marriage?
I think he had incredible insight into trends in society which were going to harm marriage. If I can choose two very opposite examples, one of the most recent ones, and one of the things that Norman was working on at the time of his death, were the government's now passed reforms to divorce. Norman clearly saw that by making no-fault divorce the norm and increasing the speed at which divorces could be obtained, that this was going to lead to an increase in divorce and breakup of marriage. And I remember him expressing several times that he could not see how any supporter of marriage could see otherwise. I fear that Norman's predictions were right, and indeed those that you share in Coalition for Marriage, that by making the exit quick and allegedly not attributing fault, it will lead to an increase, not only of divorces, but also, I think, regretted divorces as well, because certainly from my time as a general practitioner, let alone my own marriage, both experiences show me that all couples go through times when it is not easy. The wonderful thing is that when you are committed, you work through it, and very often, after even a period of years of it being tough, you come through the other side and discover that there is a love that is stronger, and it's different, but it's deeper than you could possibly have imagined.
It can be so tempting, if it's easy to walk away, to walk away. And that's not to say that anybody in a abusive or adulterous or a position of abandonment should put up with that. But struggle is something different, and struggle is sometimes which actually leads to, as you say, much more love after you've understood each other.
With regard to the divorce issue, I clearly saw that Norman was right from the beginning. I must confess that when the issue of same-sex marriage first arose, I wasn't quite so sure in my own mind that would undermine the institution of marriage. Having appreciated and seen from the evidence the benefits of marriage, I could understand why same-sex couples might want the advantages of it, and certainly didn't foresee the way in which actually it has changed the contour of what marriage is. And I think Norman saw that very, very clearly. So he had a very shrewd ability to see trends, I think, beyond the immediate and apparent advantages.